I don't just talk about other people's stuff, I also make my own. Books in particular. To date, I have 4 books you can check out on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and the short story collection Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Hop on down to the description for Amazon links to all 4 books. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni Viewer, and after a long hiatus, IDW is finally publishing Godzilla comics again. Just in time for most comic book stores to be closing as the comics industry nears another collapse due to various poor choices driving the audience towards manga instead. You said a mouthful just then, Snazzy, though I guess you're not technically wrong. Rather than dwell on that, though, I'm going to see if this return was worth it. I've got trades of every previous Godzilla title IDW released, and I really should review those at some point. For now, let's just say that, much like the movies, these comics have been all over the place in terms of quality. Some are great, some are awful, and some are just okay. As for the new stuff, let's ease ourselves in with a one-and-done issue of Godzilla Rivals, which pits the king against the queen. The year is 1984, and photojournalist Mima Kinjo is at Kanoya Air Base on the shores of Lake Ikeda. She's not there for any special reason, she was simply commissioned to do a puff piece on the base. But a strange glow from underwater piques her curiosity and leads her to discover Mothra on the lake bed, bound by chains bearing the JSDF brand. In English for some reason. Overwhelmed with instant sympathy, she feels compelled to free Mothra, even though she has no idea how. Meanwhile, Godzilla has reappeared and is making his way to that very spot. Mima is convinced that Mothra is the only hope of stopping the King of the Monsters, but the Rear Admiral in charge of the base sees no difference between the two beasts. So Mima will have to be a little rebellious to make things right. Okay, so let's begin with the positives. The art in this book is really good. And that's about it, really. Visually, the comic really is nice to look at. The colors blend well, the characters look consistent from panel to panel, and the action shots are well framed and dynamic. The kaiju designs appear mostly Heisei-inspired, but are not exact copies of what we see in the movies. Godzilla seems like a variation of the 1984 design with a few elements from the 1954 and 2016 design sprinkled in. Mothra, meanwhile, appears to be a blend of the Showa, Heisei, and Tokyo SOS designs, and she looks good on every page. There are a few issues here and there, like how the chains binding Mothra aren't visible in her introductory shot even though they should be, and good luck figuring out what they're attached to, or Godzilla sometimes being drawn with minimal detail, but glaring art issues are few and far between. The cover also looks good. It manages to fit both Godzilla and Mothra in with the titles and graphics without feeling overstuffed, which isn't always easy when dealing with comic book dimensions. Art does count for quite a bit in a comic, but it's the story that really makes it last. And unfortunately, this comic doesn't have much going for it in that department. For starters, there's no real sense of cause and effect anywhere to be found here. Most of what happens in the story appears to happen for no reason. Mima finds Mothra chained in the lake and wants to set her free. Why? The dialogue later suggests that she's never heard of Mothra before. The audience knows that Mothra won't intentionally harm her, but Mima doesn't know that. She does, however, know that kaiju exist. At the very least, Godzilla has shown up before, and he's a destructive force in this timeline. Even if the G-Man is her only frame of reference, that should be more than enough to give her pause when approaching Mothra. Yet trying to set the bug free is the first thing she does, even before she gets the idea that Mothra can stop Godzilla. Speaking of which, why does she think Mothra will stop Godzilla anyway? Remember, she doesn't know anything about Mothra, so where does this idea that she's humanity's ally come from? Sure, she gets confirmation from the Shobijin, or Cosmos, they're never named in this book, but they show up after Mima has already set Mothra free. Mima only seems to be on Mothra's side because if she's not, Mothra stays stuck at the bottom of the lake. What if the intention is to be about taking a leap of faith? Perhaps Mima senses that Mothra is different, and since she's the only one who does, she takes a chance and it pays off. And what evidence is there in this comic that would make that intention clear? Well,
I did say what if for a reason.
Exactly. There is one line when she's confronting the Rear Admiral about releasing Mothra that reads as if she does know what the kaiju is, but that line doesn't jive with anything else said in the scene, so it just comes out of nowhere and makes no sense in context. She also doesn't really make a proper case for why Mothra should be set free other than because she thinks it's cruel to keep her imprisoned and she might help humanity against Godzilla. When the Rear Admiral says her opinion is uninformed, I agree with him. Yes, I know that Mima is right because I have greater context as a G fan, but given that she has no solid reason to believe anything she's saying, it's no wonder she loses the argument. Speaking of the Rear Admiral, who incidentally is never named in the book, he also suffers from the lack of cause and effect. He throws Mima in jail after she frees Mothra, as well he should. She used an explosive to destroy government property and set loose a force which, as far as anyone knows, will just make a bad situation worse. Then after Godzilla thrashes the Navy on his way to the shore, he just lets her go and tells her where Mothra went. Again, why? Even as he's opening the door, he makes it very clear that he doesn't believe Mima is right. He brings up the loss of his men as a reason, but I don't see how that justifies this action. Well, gee, I don't want to spray chemicals in my garden because I think it might hurt the bees and hummingbirds, but I got stung by a wasp, so I guess I'll just dump that stuff everywhere, even though I still think it's a mistake. Now, if he had received his own visit from the Cosmos/Shobijin telling him to let Mima go, that might fix the problem, but he doesn't. As such, we see this military veteran doing something against his better judgment purely because the writer made him do it. Godzilla, unfortunately, also suffers from this problem. This comic has something in common with Shin Godzilla in that Goji only appears to come ashore because if he doesn't, nothing happens. We have no inclination if he's going after Mothra or looking for a nuclear power plant to feed off of because in every shot he's dealing with whatever is right in front of him with no hints about any long-term goal. There's no indication that he's on the hunt or any ties to human hubris or something, so in the end Godzilla is there simply because he's there. You're right, this isn't sounding good at all. I suppose it can't get much worse than you've already described, though. Oh no? Wait till you hear this next part. When Mothra is released, she doesn't make a beeline for Godzilla. Instead, she heads to Sengan-en, where she cocoons herself so she can regain her strength. Kinda weird that she cocoons herself as an adult, but otherwise it's understandable. She's been trapped underwater for God knows how long, so needing to rejuvenate her strength makes sense. It's the next part that's ridiculous. Mima, having been set free by the Rear Admiral because he thought it was the thing to do at the time, goes to the site and gets another vision from the Peanuts who tell her... I almost can't say it. They tell her that Mothra cannot escape her own cocoon without Mima's help.
Hang on, let me get this straight. Mothra cocooned herself for the sole purpose of recovering her strength, but she's still not strong enough to break through the cocoon that she made herself?
That's the long and the short of it. Apparently Mima has to be Mothra's strength or else she'll be stuck in that cocoon forever.
Wait, this really doesn't make any sense.
Being trapped by the chains, I get. They're probably specially designed to trap her, plus she's underwater, which isn't her element. But she made this darn cocoon herself.
If she can't break through from the inside, how is a tiny human supposed to free her from the outside? It's the same density either way. How the heck did something that stupid make it to the final draft?
Well, I do have a theory. It probably has something to do with feminism. Specifically, third-wave feminism. Let's look again at that argument Mima has with Rear Admiral What's-His-Name. Even though she has no case to make and no reason to believe what she believes, the reader is still meant to side with her over the man she's arguing with. This, combined with the line about how Mima must be Mothra's strength, paints an image of Mima as a feminist figure. She's a strong woman who doesn't acquiesce to what stubborn men tell her to do, she's always right even when she loses the argument and doesn't have any evidence to support her, and her actions ultimately save the whole world. That sort of bad writing has worked its way into a lot of female comic book characters recently, but where this comic goes really wrong is making Mima strong at Mothra's expense. Look, it's no secret that Mothra is physically weak as far as kaiju go. Being weak, however, just means that she doesn't pack as much of a wallop as other monsters. She can still put up one heck of a fight, and frequently does.
Being weak isn't the same as being helpless. The Mothra in this comic is helpless.
The book contrives a scenario towards the end for Mima to save her just to keep Mima active in the story, but it robs the ending of credibility. Mothra spends 3/4 of the book as a damsel in distress who needs rescuing by a tiny human at every turn, and we're still supposed to believe that she can stop Godzilla? I don't even believe she could loosen the lid on a pickle jar.
After the bit with the cocoon, I see no reason why Mima couldn't just go and fight Godzilla by herself. If she can break through something Mothra can't, that makes her physically stronger than an actual god, and therefore the strongest human in any Godzilla story. She might actually have a shot, and the fact that I just said all of that is just mind-boggling.
Oh, and let's not forget how Mothra's sacrificial move of sealing herself in another cocoon with Godzilla ultimately proves useless, as he clearly survives and escapes, which implies that she didn't survive.
You know, the irony is that people already consider Mothra a feminist icon.
Many fans agree that she embraces positive feminine attributes such as grace, beauty, and motherhood, while also embodying generally good traits like mercy, redemption, and justice. This, combined with how active she is and how she can even redeem creatures who were once villains, has led many G fans to prop her up as the kaiju equivalent of Wonder Woman.
This comic, on the other hand, reduces her to a useless lump just so it can elevate a human character who's not very compelling and is never going to appear again. Ain't that the truth? And it's a crying shame, too.
The comic was written by a writer named Mary Kenny. I haven't read anything else by her, so I won't make any snap judgments about her capabilities as a writer. Maybe she's great when she's writing superheroes or ponies or any of the other stuff in her bibliography. I don't know.
All I know is that this particular comic is a misfire. But that's not to say it's completely unsalvageable. How about this for an alternative?
After being visited by the Shobijin, Mima escapes from her cell by picking the lock and begins snooping around the base. This is made easier because everyone is preoccupied with Godzilla, so they're not paying attention to her. She finds the archives and discovers the file on Mothra. It turns out that Mothra showed up right before Godzilla's previous attack 10 years ago, but she was immediately trapped by the JSDF. Also in the file are notes that several soldiers were undergoing psychological evaluation after hallucinating doll-sized women urging them to set Mothra free. She brings the file to the command center just in time to hear that Rear Admiral Nemo has diverted some jets to bomb Mothra's cocoon and take her out permanently. She objects, stating that the first time Mothra showed up was to oppose Godzilla, but the SDF screwed that up and now history is repeating itself. At first, Rear Admiral No Name Given still refuses to listen. Mima then says that Mothra's glow right before Godzilla's reappearance couldn't be a coincidence. She was anticipating the King's return and trying to escape. The Rear Admiral still scoffs. Finally, she mentions the Shobijin, and this gets the Rear Admiral's attention. We briefly flash back to the first attack when he was younger and saw the fairies for himself. He didn't listen to them back then and was later told by the base's resident shrink that it was a hallucination. But how could Mima have seen them before reading about them in the file? Incidentally, this would require Mima to have seen the Shobijin or had some sort of psychic communication with Mothra prior to setting her free. Back to the present, the Rear Admiral realizes that perhaps he has made a mistake. He calls back the jets heading for Mothra, and just in time, Mothra emerges on her own and soars into battle just as she intended to do 10 years ago.
That's one alternative at least. Maybe it's better, maybe it's worse. But either way, I still don't think this comic works in its current form.
As Snazzy put it, an attempt at inserting ideology only resulted in the tearing down of an icon who already embraced that ideology, thereby nullifying the point. If I were a new fan and this was my introduction to Mothra, I'd be left wondering why this pathetic bug is the second most popular kaiju in the series if she can't do anything for herself or even manage a clean victory.
As a lifelong fan, though, I can only be disappointed at how badly this thing disrespects the Queen of the Monsters. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. It takes a lot to make me compliment the rebirth of Mothra movies, but if there's one thing they got right, it's knowing that Mothra isn't this pathetic.
Congratulations, you reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to consider supporting us on Patreon. Of course, the other way to support us is to go to Amazon and check out our books: Operation Red Dragon, The Kaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Also check the description for links to DeviantArt and other platforms we operate. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.